I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
This week we are talking about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. From 1989. This movie opened up the same day as Tim Burton's Batman.
And somehow we still remember this movie.
Yeah. In fact, I would say that the fact that this opened against Burton's Batman helped it. Like, people who could not get tickets to see Batman went to go see Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And it kind of made this movie a hit that where Disney didn't think it would be one. And for a small moment in time, it was Disney's highest grossing movie ever. Until a few months later, when Dead Poets Society came out. So, for those of you keeping score, the other movie that Disney made that came out that year was The Little Mermaid. Which means Honey, I Shrunk the Kids made more money than The Little Mermaid.
History is weird.
It is. This had been in our list for a while, but you really pushed for this one, Kiki, and there's a few reasons why.
Yeah, well, recently I've been watching a lot of Let's Plays for a video game called Grounded. So if you're really into video games right now, you'll know that that's kind of the recently been the new hotness for a lot of Let's Play channels. Interestingly, when people look at that game, they're like, so they just made Honey, I Shrunk the Kids into a video game. And yeah, they kind of did, even to the point that Grounded was one of the original titles of this film.
Yeah, The Grounded, and then what was another?
Well, it was the second title, because the original title that the writers brought to Disney was called the Teeny Weenies. When this,
I would not be caught dead, even as a 10-year-old child going to see a movie called The Teeny Weenies, and I watched a TV show called The Littles.
Yeah, no, when this script showed up at Disney by the original writers, they were like, hi, do you want to buy our script? It's called Teeny Weenies. And strangely enough, Disney was like, yes, we do want to buy this script, but we do not want to call it Teeny Weenies. Thank you. No. But one of the reasons that that this film is kind of interesting is because this is one of the weirdest crossovers to my poor little brain, because this script was brought to Disney Studios by Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna. And if those two names do not mean anything to you, you are about to go on a wild, wild ride. We have talked about some of my favorite people on this show before. You know, we got to talk when we talked about Guardians of the Galaxy. We got to talk about, trauma films, and we've gotten to talk about Roger Corman before on this show, and now we're getting to go back like we did in our Doctor Strange episode and talk about our good old friends from Full Moon Pictures here. Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna are the creative minds behind one of my personal favorite movies ever in history, Re-Animator.
So much so that I know that you traveled halfway across the country just to meet Jeffrey Combs.
Yeah, and have him sign several things, including a lovely Re-Animator poster in which he signed "Cat dead, details later, love Herbert." It is one of my treasured possessions. So yeah, Stuart Gordon, who is unfortunately no longer with us, and Brian Yuzna, who at time of recording still is, thankfully, are some of the masters of schlocky B horror films, which is my personal fave genre. And they brought this weird little kids getting shrunk by their mad scientist father and having to traverse a backyard full of horrors to get back to him, to Disney for reasons I cannot fathom. I guess because they didn't have the money to make this at their own studio.
Quite possibly. One of the big questions that Disney had when reading the script is that they were afraid that that they were going to kill off the kids just based on their reputation, and they had to assure Disney, we will not kill off any of the kids. We just want the audience to believe that they will die.
Yeah, and I'm certain I really want to read this original script. This is one of my like weird little holy grails of like whatever Disney originally read from these two, because it's got to be absolutely bonkers. Because I've seen some of the stuff they've put on camera. I cannot imagine what this original script read like. In fact, Stuart Gordon was originally supposed to be the director of this film.
And
the
then
eventual
he kind of fell ill.
Yeah, he got some kind of illness and couldn't commit to the project. This was, I believe, the directorial debut of our good friend Joe Johnston there. So, Rocketeer and Jumanji and Pagemaster, and we've talked about him tons. And
Yeah.
of course, eventually would go on to do Captain America: First Avenger. So,
So this is where it starts.
Yeah, this is his first directing job. Is directing this weird little supposed to be Stuart Gordon project. You can see, if you know anything about the work of Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna, shades of what they probably originally intended. Because there's some stuff in there that when I watched it as a kid, I was like, are they really going there? Like that kid in the Cheerio scene.
Yeah. Don't eat me.
Yeah, I was like, I'm sure there's some kids that still have nightmare, like 40 somethings. I say kids. Like there's like our age people that I'm sure probably still have nightmares about that. And of course, the giant bugs are direct throwbacks to, certain B movies of the 50s and stuff like that. I mean, so much of this is you can call out particular scenes and go, like, if you know your B movie history, you can call out like exact films where you're like, oh, I know where that's being pulled from.
I feel like we've already talked about a movie about shrinking people that somehow involve ants.
Yeah, I know. But whereas Ant-Man does it just kind of in the let's do this to show off our special effects and whatever, the way it's done here is very much homage.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get around to Ant-Man, you don't feel, if you're the type of person I am, you don't feel like, oh, this is a throwback to something like them or whatever,
I'm just thinking of like the possibility of Hank Pym and Wayne Zelinsky discussing shrinking terminology, discussing their various shrinking technologies.
Yeah.
Michael Douglas and Rick Moranis just came out of retirement. Michael Douglas, let's make that a Disney Plus short.
That would be great. I would love that. That's a crossover I would enjoy seeing. When you were watching this as a kid, you sat in the theater, or if you watched it on VHS for the first time or something,
I watched it on Disney Channel.
Or the Disney Channel. Yeah, I think this was one of the ones that I saw on VHS, because it came out early enough that this was not when I was seeing stuff in theaters yet. But when you first saw this movie as a kid, if you're our age, the first thing that hit you watching these backyard scenes was, oh man, I want this to be like a playground. And then of course Disney made it into a playground.
Yeah, there was a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids playground area in one of the parks where you could climb on a recreation of the ant and go through the grass fields, and they
go down the little grass slide and everything.
Yeah, there was a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ride at Epcot called Honey, I Shrunk the Audience, which they were able to get Rick Moranis back for that, and it was a 3D motion simulator ride where he shrunk the audience, and then you kind of went through the similar that to the first movie, but you have that 3D motion simulator thing, and it was good. And it replaced Captain EO, and then when Michael Jackson died, they brought back Captain EO.
Yeah, I am very sad that I never got to go in the little park thing and go down all the little slides and stuff.
Yeah.
Because that was one thing that I really did want to do. And it's one of those things that I was very sad about.
And I believe some of the props and animatronics were part of the tour at the MGM Studios at one point.
Yeah, I think I did see those. The props on the tour. But I don't think I ever went through the ride, and I definitely did not get to go through the little playground that they built, which makes me sad. Because that little playground thing, when I found out that they had built it for real, I was like, oh, the dream. But no, I never got to go through it myself. But yeah, this is one of those weird little things where I'm like, how in the world did this happen? I cannot believe this completely bizarre mix of minds put this together. And then of course it stars two of my favorite actors, Rick Moranis, and then Matt Frewer, who
We've mentioned him before.
Cast against type.
We mentioned him before because when we talked about Super Mario Brothers, we mentioned Max Headroom, and John Frewer is Max Headroom.
Yeah, Matt Frewer, you have to do. I am currently in the middle of watching a recent cyberpunky kind of series, and you are not allowed to do a cyberpunk series without putting Matt Frewer in it. Like, it's just apparently against the law.
He eventually ended up in the Lawnmower Man movies, which was, by that point, they were just copying Max Headroom.
Yeah. It all goes back to that, but to see a movie where it's like, oh, it's a movie, it's about a sort of mad scientist, Matt Frewer's in it. Oh, really? What part does he play?
The jock dad.
The jock dad next door. It's like, no, that's not right. You've got that mixed up.
But we already have Rick Moranis playing the nerd dad, and that's him playing Type.
Yeah, so I was like, okay. I mean, I guess. I'm not saying Matt Frewer doesn't have range, but that's just all right. And then, of course, the one that I had forgotten was in this because I think the last time I saw this movie all the way through, I didn't know who she was in any other context, is, of course, we have playing Matt Frewer's wife is Christine Sutherland, who
Mrs.
everybody
Summers!
knows. Yeah, everybody knows her best as Joyce, Buffy's mom from the Buffy TV series. I turned on the movie and I'm sitting there watching it and I was like, wait a minute, is that Buffy's mom? Is that Joyce? Like, yes, it is.
Yeah. And, the legendary Rick Moranis, he like I said, he's playing Type. He, Ghostbusters, Little Shop of Horrors, Spaceballs. He's just the little nerd in the glasses. And just because Rick Moranis looks like a little nerd in the glasses. The only time he ever played against Type was when he played Barney Rubble in The Flintstones, which would come out the year after this movie came out.
I mean, honestly, isn't Barney Rubble also just kind of a little nerd in glasses?
Barney Rubble never wore glasses.
I know, but
glasses.
But it's like the glasses are there even when the glasses aren't there,
Yeah. But Moranis was not the first choice for this role. The script was written with Chevy Chase in mind because National Lampoon's Vacation had just come out, and he kind of was like the it guy for comedies. It's just he was unavailable because he was filming Christmas Vacation, the sequel, which was the better option because, it's the movie that everyone watches at Christmas.
You forget how much I stay away from Christmas stuff at Christmas time. I watch Muppets at Christmas. End of list.
The second choice was John Candy, who passed on the role, but suggested his good friend and co-star of many of the movies. He co-starred in Little Shop, co-starred in Spaceballs, and was also a fellow member of Second City. SCTV, John Candy suggests Rick Moranis. And honestly, of those three, I think Rick Moranis was the best choice.
Yeah, I mean, you just gotta love it.
Maybe if the neighbor was Dave Thomas. Good day, eh? You hoser.
Yeah.
And there's your SCTV reference.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is now set in Canada. They get buried in snow and immediately freeze to death. The end.
So, another funny thing that I found out reading for this movie, Marcia Strassman, who plays Rick Moranis' wife in the movie, she actually dyed her hair red for this movie because the script called for the wife to be a redhead. After looking over the dailies, Jeffrey Katzenberg called Strassman and said, well, we think that the character would be better looking as a blonde. We want you to dye your hair blonde. She ends up telling Joe Johnston, and he says, we've been filming for 2 weeks. We have half the movie with you as a redhead. And now they want you to dye your hair blonde. And Katzenberg responds, don't worry, no one will notice. So for half of this movie, she's a redhead. And for the second half of this movie, she's blonde. And if this is the first time you're finding that out, then that means Katzenberg was right.
Man, I hate to admit Katzenberg was right about anything, but I don't think I've ever noticed watching this movie. Because honestly, I hate to say it, but the mom does nothing in this movie.
She would get her moment to shine in the sequel, but we're not talking about the sequel.
Yeah, but in this movie, the mom does nothing.
I feel
she
like
takes a phone call. She passes out in the background of a shot. The mom is a non-issue for 98% of this movie.
I mean, maybe that was something cut in the scripting because, she seems to be the only one that's making any money in this household because we see.
I mean, she sells houses. She's a realtor.
And we get a quick throwaway mention of Rick Moranis having quit his job to be a full-time inventor. And when the shrinking ray doesn't sell, he says, maybe I can go get my old job back. So it's clear that she's the only one making money in the family, which is why she's never home, leads us to daughter Amy kind of becoming the default adult at the house.
And the thing is that she's also never home because they've been having some sort of marital trouble, and they had a fight, and mom is staying at grandma's again. That is the first thing we find out in the movie. Is that the daughter is making breakfast for the son, and basically, and the dad, and basically taking care of the household because mom is staying at grandma's again because mom and dad had a fight.
So it's clear that while she wants to be supportive of her husband being an inventor, it's clearly straining them.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell this was not written to be a Disney movie straight up. Because I don't think that Disney would have commissioned this movie and was like, hey, start it off with the parents are fighting and on their way toward a divorce. We've talked about it before, like pre-Disney Renaissance, and this was literally the start of the Disney Renaissance, like we said.
A few months later, Little Mermaid
Little Mermaid came out this same year. So, even during the weird experimental time Disney was going through at this moment, I still don't think Disney would have been like, hey, let's start the movie with,
Mm-hmm.
However, that is how they chose to start the movie, and I think that was left over from the Gordon Yuzna script, because that is very much how they would have started a movie.
And we have little Nicky, who is the spitting image of his father, has the glasses, has the same haircut, even wearing a little baby lab coat because he wants to be like his dad.
And he's tinkering around with some sort of little toy ray gun thing that he's trying to use on the dog, which is so cute.
Mm-hmm.
Both the dog and the little ray gun, that he's trying to use. The dog in this movie is just so cute.
Yeah.
Quark. The daughter in this is the typical 80s teenager. She talks on the phone all the time, and all she wants to do is go to the mall.
And talk about boys, because the school dance is coming up, and she wants the popular boy to take her. And he's going to be at the mall later, which means she has to be at the mall later, so they can meet up, and he can potentially ask her to the dance.
Yeah, all the boys in this movie get kind of clearly defined personalities.
And her personality is girl.
We've talked about it so many times, but man, all the boys in this movie get some sort of nuance, and she gets girl.
Because we get Nicky, who is like a nerd. We get Ron, the next door neighbor, who is Nick's bully. And we got the older brother, Russ Jr., who is...
Little Russ.
Yeah. Who is not into sports. He's not into fishing, but he's really into girls.
Yeah,
So
and
much.
that's
So much.
such a weird part of the movie because Matt Frewer as Big Russ is very much, you think it's going to go, and it sort of does go the way of like, he finds out that his son got cut from the football team for being too small for football, and that makes him upset, and he's like, I don't get it, my son's not into football, and he's not into fishing, and he's not into weightlifting, and he's not into baseball, and he's not into boy stuff. And then he catches his son like ogling the really pretty girl next door as
If
she's dancing.
if he had, that's one thing that I think would have gotten into his head is like he takes out the weights and say, hey, if you lift these weights for a few months, you'll be the strongest athlete on the team. If he had said, hey, if you lift these weights for a few months, the girls will be all over you, maybe that would have clicked into his head.
Well, but I'm not even talking about that. Like, he keeps going, like, what's wrong with my son? And like, the end of that train of thought for a guy like that, Like, what's wrong with my son?
Okay.
He's not into all the masculine things. And that that's where his brain is going. And then he catches his son, like, ogling
The
the
girl
cute
next
girl
door.
next door. And you would think, like, that would be like, oh, thank goodness, with the implication of there's nothing wrong with my son. Oh, good. He's just really preoccupied with the girl next door. He wants to be home. He don't want to be he don't want to be at football practice. He wants to be home staring at the girl next door. Well, at least I don't have to worry about that now,
I think
Like,
that's a little too mature for a Disney movie.
I know, but at least, you would kind of like, but he still yells at him for staring at the girl next door instead of wanting to go fishing. And I'm like, my dude, isn't this what you want? Like, don't you want, like, the weird little heteronormative, like, child? Like,
Yeah, he's Big Russ. Big Russ Senior is obsessed over this fishing trip that they're taking. He puts a deposit on a cabin that they're going to be staying at for the weekend, and everyone has to come. It's like,
they're
but
getting in the RV. He's packing up all the frozen foods and stuff.
and mispronouncing them.
Yeah. Chicken parmigiano and all that.
Yeah,
But that is the one weird part of the movie to me. Like, the rest of it makes sense, but the fact that he finds his son obviously having a crush on the neighbor girl, and he's still mad at him for that, and I'm like, okay, I get that you consider it a weird family, but even in the weird family, she's the one quote unquote normal one. Like, she's the one trying to be the popular girl at school. She follows the fashion trends. She does all the appropriate feminine things, like,
mhm.
the rest of them are the weird
Nerds.
sciencey ones. Yeah, the weird nerd ones, and she's the one like, oh, I have to get dressed up and go to the prom. I have to go to the mall. I have to do the normal societal thing. Like, if anything, that should be like the one member of the family. That should be like the Marilyn in the Munsters or whatever, where everybody's like,
I mean,
oh,
right
you
when
poor normal child living with this family of freaks, like,
as Wayne is getting all of his stuff to go to this conference to try to sell his laser, she just says, "Hey, don't forget to pick up my dress for the dance at the dry cleaners," just to kind of push home she is obsessed with fashion, for she is a teenager in the 80s.
The one thing about her that I did relate to, though, is that at the beginning of the movie where she's on the phone and she ends up getting caught up in the phone cord because it's one of the really long phone cords, and she's running around the kitchen doing stuff, and then she hangs up the phone and she realizes she's tied up in the phone cord and she has to pick up the phone and untangle herself and then hang up the phone again.
You see,
I did
kids,
that so many times.
You see, kids, back in the old days, back in our day, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth, phones used to be attached to the wall with a cord.
And if you had a really long phone cord so you could wander around the house and still do stuff while you were on the phone with your friends, sometimes you would be forgetful and tangle yourself up in the phone cord and hang
Or
up the
knock stuff
phone.
over. I was the one that would knock stuff over.
Oh yeah, if you had like an island in your kitchen or something and you walked across it and then all of a sudden you'd hear like a crash, you'd be like, "Oh man, I just knocked over a glass of water." Yeah. Ugh.
I'll call you back.
Yeah, I'll call you back. I just have to clean up like 4 dishes I just knocked to the floor. Yeah, that was my entire dinner on the floor now. Yeah. No, I did that so many times. But yeah, that was the one like relatable thing of that opening with her trying to do her let's go to the mall bit. But yeah, I loved all this little science stuff in their house when I was a kid. Cuz they had all the little machines that would transmit from the attic to the
before text messaging.
Yeah, he invented text messaging before text messaging.
So yeah, there's a buzzer in the kitchen to let him know, hey, come down to eat, and then he'll type on his computer, and it'll send a message off a little receipt printer from that you would see at a store, and with whatever his message is. So yeah, he invented text messaging.
Yeah, and it looks so weird and quaint now, but that was like hilariously cutting edge technology. I wanted a house wired for that stuff when I was
and now
kid.
You do.
And now I do, and I still just yell across the house. I keep forgetting that I can, make all my, Bezos enabled wiretaps do it for me, and instead I still just scream across the house to whoever's around, The really awesome thing though is how cool the cobbled together look of it was.
Yeah,
like you really did believe that he built it all in his house
from just materials he found,
from like Radio Shack parts.
Yeah.
Man, remember when you could just go to Radio Shack and just buy random electronic nonsense?
We're old.
We are so old.
It gave me a very Doc Brown's house at the beginning of Back to the Future.
Yeah. Same vibe.
Also, the musical score is very Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Well, it is James Horner. So, it's got that, I mean, of course, he's kind of best known for his work with James Cameron, because he did, Titanic and Avatar and all that. But of course, he did a couple of the Star Trek films. So, Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock are his. And then, of course, he did Rocketeer. So we've talked about his work on that before. But yeah, I mean, he's legit, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, he pulls in, a lot of those little nods to other things. And then, of course, he's got that dun 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 da 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 da. That
I was
he
getting
pulls
to
in.
that. I was getting to that, and that resulted in a lawsuit.
Yeah, it did.
Raymond Scott, who wrote that, the song is called Powerhouse. Raymond Scott wrote that, and when he saw the movie and the song, he heard his song, or at least a file off the serial numbers version of it, he sued Disney because for copyright infringement. And they settled out of court, and he did get some royalties. And because of that, the soundtrack to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids wouldn't get released for about 30 years.
it was interesting when, when I heard it, because I was like, isn't that...
I've heard that in a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, that's a Warner Brothers thing. That's not Disney. Come on, It was really weird, when I was a kid, because I was like, that's a Looney Tunes thing. So.
Yeah. But Looney Tunes did a lot of that old, well, it would have been contemporary music back then, but we would consider it older music now because it was the 30s and 40s.
Yeah. There was something in the 80s films that we loved about just a random dude making weird gadgets in his attic basement garage gone awry movies,
Kind of going with that trope or that dream of being the self-made man.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many of them in that time period that I don't really know what was in the water in Hollywood at the time, but man, did we get a lot of them.
I mean, it did inspire people. Everyone was like, I'm going to invent the next big thing and then I'm going to be rich.
I mean, we didn't really get over that, but I think it's just less interesting to write a movie about, somebody creating the next, app. For some reason in the 80s, we were kind of willing to believe like random suburban dad can create shrink ray in attic. And now we only will believe that if it's like in the comic book universe.
Yeah.
It's like there's something broken in our suspension of disbelief, I think.
I mean, we most of the people living today have already resigned to the fact that back in the 80s it was like, all you needed was a decent paying job and you can buy a house. Now there are people who are just resided to their fate of I'm never going to own a house, ever. So like the depression has sinked into the dream ain't for me.
Yeah, I think it was different from like, a guy with a dream and, $50 in a Radio Shack and you can create random sci-fi nonsense. And now it's like, maybe with $5 I can afford some fries at McDonald's if I'm lucky, like.
I could do that or I could eat today.
Yeah.
Poor Nikki. Like Nikki is just completely out of... He has no interest in any kind of physical labor whatsoever. Like they ask him about, do you do any sports? Is this sports are for mortals? His dad asked him to mow the lawn and he bucks it off to his buddy.
Which you gotta love the way he does that, because he's like, if you mow my lawn, I'll let you use the lawnmower with the remote control. And like that was a way to make a kid do anything in the 80s, was be like, I've got a remote control for it.
Yeah.
Like you cannot underestimate like a kid in the 80s, early 90s would do anything if it was done by remote control.
I mean, for some of us, we were the remote control.
Yeah, I mean, that time when your parents would just, like, poke you in the arm and be like, Channel 6.
Put on Channel 5, kid, the news is on.
Yeah. Go turn the volume up. Like, yeah.
Your mother can't hear her stories. Turn the volume up.
Yep. My grandma used to say, you're still on your first legs. Go do it. And I used to go like, aren't you technically still on your first legs? And like, or I've got a bone in my leg. That was the other one she would say. Go turn up the volume for me. I got a bone in my leg. I'd be halfway to the TV and I'd go like, wait a minute. You're supposed to have bone in your leg. You're supposed to have more than one bone in your leg, actually.
Well, you're
but I
already
was
there,
already
kid.
halfway to the TV, so I'd be like, yeah, whatever. So yeah,
But
so we got the household of quirky inventors, and we got the
the household of
household
jocks,
of jocks, and each one of them has the line of like, "What a weird family."
and each
Um,
one has one that's different.
yeah, what an adorable meet cute. So of course, you got little Nicky who's tricking his friend question mark into coming back later to mow the lawn
He
via
pulls,
remote control.
he pulls a Tom Sawyer and it works.
Yeah, no, I mean it's brilliant and I love it. Way to hustle, but
Yeah.
and then of course you got Ron there over at the Matt Frewer house where he's just like, yeah, I don't care about the fishing trip necessarily, but I'm gonna play some baseball by myself. And of course we get the old trope of, oh no, I have broken my neighbor's window. But Lil Russ is an upstanding sort of kid, and also he really has a crush on the cute girl next door and wants any excuse to go talk to her. So he goes over to be like, hey, my little brother broke your window, and I'm here to make him fess up. And
It
also,
takes him about 10 minutes to
today.
get there. It takes him about 10 minutes to get there because he's like, hi, hello,
Yeah.
I have forgotten my name and 90% of my brain functions.
Yeah. Girl pretty.
Girl pretty.
Little brother stupid. Yeah. But we finally get into the full shenanigans of the movie when you find out that the baseball jiggled the right jiggly thing to make the thing work correctly or wrongly or somethingy. And, when the two little boys open the door, they get shrunked. And when the older teenagers come up to look for their little brothers, they also get shrunked. And now we have shrunked the kids. Yay.
Yay, we have a title.
Yeah. I think Honey, I Shrunk It the Kids would have been a much better title, but nobody asked me.
This movie actually got ridiculed for improper grammar. And no, I'm not joking about that. Like some group gave what they called a dunce cap to this movie for having an improper grammar title. It should be Honey, I Shrank the Kids, not Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And the director says, yeah, that's the point. That's the joke. So, like, we're about half hour, 45 minutes into this movie, and the real movie finally begins with the kids, now shrunk, trying to get from the alley trash can back to the house.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that this movie is not so much plot filled as it is your backyard is actually terrifying if you were the size of most of the creatures in it.
Yeah, they see this to them a river of like muddy water with dead bugs in it, and they say, "Hey, let's take a swim." No, I'm not swimming in that.
Well, yeah, because I realized that it's probably just a river of dog pee.
Yeah.
They don't say that for sure, but they say, we don't actually know what that is. It could be anything. It could be, the last place the dog went. The thing is, though, is that it starts out kind of fun for them because, the first thing they do is they get on a blade of grass and they slide down and it's like, wee, slide, and, whatever. And then Nicky really quickly does some math because he had a calculator in his pocket because of course he did because he's a nerd. And you know what? This movie actually made me kind of angry because I kept thinking like, teachers in math class say that you're never going to have a calculator on it, but that kid gets shrunk and thrown out in the trash in his backyard, and he still has a calculator on him. But the thing is that he does the math, and he's like, okay, for us, this is going to be the equivalent of walking like over 3 miles or something. They start the journey, and then they're like, well, let's climb this flower and we'll see where we are in the yard and which way we have to go. And then they fall into the pollen, and at first he correctly says, like, hey, I can't be allergic to the pollen because it's too big to go in my nose.
And then sneezes anyway, because joke.
And then he sneezes anyway, which completely ruins the joke there. And then they get picked up by a bee. And we get the first bit of heroics from Little Russ.
The bee scene for 1989 is actually pretty well filmed, because you have to fit. I don't know which one got filmed first, but you got to film the camera work in the backyard, and then you have to film the kids on the bee model or whatever it is, and then having to put those two together so it makes sense. So for 1989 special effects, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that Disney probably just used the same idea as most of their motion rides. Where they, moved the camera around the backyard, and then they put the actors or stunt people on the giant bee, and then they rear projected it and then moved the bee in sync with the
possible. I mean, this is about a year
visual.
or so. Yeah, this is about a year or so after Roger Rabbit came out. So they already had that technology when they did it with Toontown. Speaking of, this movie came out with one of the Roger Rabbit shorts we talked about previously, Tummy Trouble. So there you go.
Yeah, and we did mention that it came out with the movie when we talked about the short, but other way around now. But yeah, no, and granted, you can see the seams when you're watching it today. I mean, it's no longer quite as impressive.
Watching it on a VHS or old school TV, it was fine, but now you're watching it in HD Blu-ray quality. Yeah.
Yeah, the copy on Disney Plus, you can definitely, tell the joins, as it were. But it's still not bad. I mean, if you take into account, like, okay, yeah, this is like a almost 40-year-old movie now. It's pretty damn good,
A lot of especially a lot of the practical effects still hold up.
Oh, well, the practical effects are really good.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell, of course, because the image is sharper. You can tell things like it's more obvious that when they're on the broom at the beginning, you can tell that they're holding on to giant pieces of foam rather than actual bits of broom straw, It doesn't look quite like a broom.
Or dog hair.
Or dog hair when they hold on to the dog, You can... The blades of grass look a bit more plasticky than they did, when you watched it in film quality and stuff. So it's a little less forgiving, I think, if you if you did it as practical effects today, I think they would work to make it, put more flocking on certain things, or make things look a little bit more realistic with some of the techniques that we have today, because they know that those, high definition cameras are going to show every single flaw in it. But for the 80s, this was incredible, and it's really impressive how much of it holds up. Like at some points it does really look like they're in a playground more than in a backyard. But especially when they do the practical stuff, when they do the forced perspective stuff, it holds up a lot better than the green screen and everything. It mostly becomes an adventure movie once they get into the backyard, of course. But we get the fact that all of the kids, their personality comes out a bit more.
Yeah.
And that's the real interesting part of the movie.
Little Ron still trying to have that tough guy exterior. It's like, when we get back there, my family's gonna sue your family for everything they got, for what they did. And then like she, Amy eventually just has enough and says, "Fine, when we get there, you'll have everything you could ever want. All I want is my little brother back."
But also we discover that Amy is a little bit smarter than she lets on to a lot of people, because she knows how to twist it around on him, because he's talking about, oh, my family's going to sue and everything. And she says, oh, yeah, well, as soon as the world realizes that my father has created an actual shrink ray, we are going to be the richest family on the planet. Like, who do you think's going to win that lawsuit? You have to feel like that line was added after Disney got the script. Am I the only one who thinks that?
And then he starts kissing her butt. I've always loved your family. Your dad's a genius.
Yeah.
But there's the scene with the water sprinklers, and she falls into the water and almost drowns. And little Russ saves her and gives her CPR, and the little one-liners. Hey, where did you learn CPR? French class. Now, for the older kids and for the adults, we get the joke. But little Nikki, who is, more into books than girls, is like, French class? How do you learn CPR in French class?
And then, of course, that becomes the final joke of the film of like, oh, I get it now, French class, ha 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 ha.
Oh, poor Nikki, you still don't get the joke.
Yeah. But you find out that Lil Russ has he's very intelligent and he's very sensitive, but he's also extremely brave.
Very resourceful.
Yeah, and extremely resourceful. And, very good in an emergency situation. Like, he's just a dude you want around if things go south, You find out that the two of them, of Amy and Russ, really do make a good team.
Mm-hmm. Also, Ron having a bit of a touch with animals, connecting with Auntie.
Yeah, you don't think that he's going to have any sort of empathetic streak in him because he's been the bully the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But when they come across the ant, and he's the one that kind of has the idea of like, hey, maybe we can write it and everything, and he helps rig up the idea of uh, you know, that kind of like carrot on the stick kind of idea with the cookie.
With the cookie, yeah.
Yeah. The oatmeal cream pie, the Little Debbie that they find.
Oh, I mean, Little Debbie, Cheerios. There's a lot of product placement in this movie.
Yeah, there is a lot of like food
Camel
product
cigarettes.
placement. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another quirk of Big Russ. Is he's supposed to be quitting smoking, but he sneaks away from his wife to get a few puffs in, mostly because he's just annoyed that his eldest son doesn't want to be a jock like him.
Yeah. But, we see Ron getting really attached to the aunt. And at one point, when they figure out that they're not going to make it back by, sundown, and that they're going to have to stay overnight in the yard.
In that big Lego.
In the big Lego, Yeah, so once they find the Lego piece for shelter, so there's your more tie-in.
And they actually use the brand name Lego. They don't say building block. They straight up say Lego.
Yeah. But it's Ron that wants to let the aunt go, he's like, hey, once we rest up, we can make it the rest of the way in the morning and all that. Like the aunt probably misses their family, and
my mom will never let me keep you anyway.
Yeah. I don't know why, like, you couldn't have like a little ant farm. Those were all the rage in the 80s. But the thing is that the ant won't leave, because it's like,
he's grown
got feels now, Yeah. It's like, you have given me cookie, I will follow you anywhere. Then they get attacked by a scorpion. I don't know where they live, that there's a scorpion.
It's supposed to be Beverly Hills, but this movie was filmed in New Mexico, so, I
mean, either works, I guess, so, the scorpion attack is horrific, but, Auntie to the rescue.
And this is stop motion, I believe, and it's really good stop motion.
Yeah, and I do like the kids fighting off the scorpion, and one of them gets that good spear shot there with the little stick they find on the ground. But poor Auntie.
Yeah. If I had a nickel for every movie that involved people shrinking and an ant that died, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, the rest.
Yeah. However, we finally get that payoff of the lawnmower, coming back, because, like, the kid forgets to come back until the next morning, and then he's like, oh yeah, remote control lawnmower. And the kids are like, no, not the lawnmower, And then Saved by the Dog, and then we get the horrible nightmare Cheerios saying of like, Dad, don't eat me, I'm in the Cheerio.
Saved by the Dog, who bites Wayne on the leg. So he looks down. Oh wait, my kid's in the cereal. Oh hey, the other kids are here too.
That poor Rick Moranis in that movie, like Wayne is never ever gonna trust cereal ever again. That every bite of cereal that guy is going to take for the rest of his life is going to be thoroughly studied with a magnifying glass before he eats it. That poor little Nicky is gonna fall asleep for the rest of his life, going like, can't sleep, Dad'll eat me, can't sleep, Dad'll eat me. Like, there's going to be so much therapy for that poor family.
And there's a bit of growth with the Thompsons, Matt Frew in there, because he's originally he's blaming the kids for just bailing on him and ruining his fishing trip, as he would say. You know, like, he loses the deposit on the cabin. His fishing buddy comes along, who is an even bigger a-hole than Big Russ is, yelling at his wife, saying, you know, the most important thing is getting to the fishing to the fishing lodge rather than worrying about the kids. He makes up an excuse that his wife is sick. Well, you know, the Big Russ that I know wouldn't let a sick wife ruin his fishing trip. He'd come anyway.
Yeah.
He says, no, this is a serious thing. I can't leave her right now. I hope you understand. Go catch a big one for me. So I guess, you know, for as big an a-hole as Big Russ is in the movie, there's proof that there's even a bigger one. And they figure it out. You know, they figure out that that the reason that the shrink machine hasn't been working is because the laser is too hot, and the baseball has been kind of a filter for the laser to make sure it shrinks. And they figure it out. Then there's a nice little gag with Matt Frewer here. Big Russ says he says he's going to be the dummy. Like, hey, you know, like, you're not going to do anything on my kid until we figure out it works on a living being. You're going to do it on me. And there's that gag. He shrinks, he regrows, and then his hat's too big.
Yeah.
I like to believe that it was just his wife screwing with him, because she's holding the hat.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I would do the same thing. I would have screwed with him. Like, I would purposely make his hat just a little bit bigger. So he puts, hey, wait a minute.
Honestly, I would have too, but I would have waited and I would have made him think that other things had not gotten to the correct size again.
But that's not
just for the rest of his life. I would have been like, "Are you really sure everything is back the way it was?" Because I am evil.
Yes, you are. Before the kids are back to their normal size, little Russ finally works up the courage to ask Amy out to the dance, and she says, "Yeah, sure. You're not a bad guy. I'll go with the dance with you."
Yeah, might as well. We've had a life-threatening situation. That's what all great things are based on.
Yeah, all great relationships start with a life-threatening event and will last forever.
Yeah. That's totally how that works.
And you know, we get a big moment with Big Russ and Little Russ, and you know, Little Russ saying, "I'm sorry I ruined your fishing trip. I just sorry I didn't want to go." And Big Russ has this moment. He's like, you know, I don't care about the fishing trip. I care about you. And
well, that's news to everyone, Dad. Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, he could have easily said, "Screw the kids. I'm going on this trip. I put too much money into this trip." He even, he complained that $90 in 1989 was a lot more than $90 in 2023.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that like
he could have easily said, "Screw it. I'm packing up this RV. I'm going with or without the kids. They're on their own for the weekend until I get back. If you want to stay in with them, okay, honey, I'm she'd probably say, "Yeah, you're going and you're not coming back."
I mean, we find out over the course of the movie, like, he wasn't cut from the team. He quit the team, and, he just was too scared to tell his dad, and, all these other little things about their relationship that, that it's just such a bad relationship. So it's not just the fishing trip.
It's just that little Russ is scared of his father.
Yeah.
And scared to disappoint his father. And I think that's the growing moment where Big Russ figures it out. You're like, all right, I'm putting too much pressure on my kid. I wish more parents would realize that. Don't put a lot of pressure on your kids. Let them be themselves.
Yeah. But we get the final thing where it's like, oh, the families have become real close, and
that's a big turkey.
And yeah, they got Thanksgiving together, and now the shrink ray makes things grow too, and
That's for the sequel. We'll save that for the sequel. And little Russ and Amy are playing footsie under the table, which kind of goes back to what the mom was worried about earlier. Our daughter with little Russ Thompson all alone in the dark. Who knows what that boy could do to her?
Yeah.
And that's the movie. I do want to say one thing, though, before we really wrap this up. I really want to say that I really did like that animated opening for this movie.
Yeah, that was a thing I didn't remember. And watching it again, I was like, oh, yeah, this is so adorable.
It's also one of Disney's early attempt at CG animation, although they did cover it up with 2D animation to kind of blend it together. So the whole thing looks 2D, but there's some 3D elements, like the hand vacuum is CG. So like, yeah, that opening sequence is really well animated. And
yeah, I did. That was a really nice surprise that had slipped my memory.
And I understand that this sequence was probably animated at a completely different time than the movie, because they don't make the kids look like any of the kids in the movie. They're just two little kids with red heads, with red hair. Probably why they wanted the mom to be a redhead, to kind of match that. But the kids in the opening animation look nothing like the kids in the rest of the movie.
Yeah, they probably started animating it before the casting was even finished, to be honest.
Quite possibly. But it's it is cute seeing these little kids running around from normal everyday objects like a record player and paper airplane and pencils and vacuum cleaners in the toaster, before they end up sealing an envelope and put in the mailbox, which leads us to the opening of the movie with the mailman putting the letters in the mailbox. Like, if there's like a riff tracks of this, I'm pretty sure that's the joke. Cap, get us out of here! We're in this letter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This did become a franchise. We did get a sequel in 92, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. As we mentioned, we had a few Disney park attractions. There was that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids playground. There was the Honey, I Shrunk the Audience ride. There was a third movie that no one really talks about, a direct-to-video film called Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, which only Rick Moranis returned for that. None of the other actors did. There was a 3-season show called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show. Not the series. It was actually called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show. It lasted 3 seasons. It was fine. I don't think I ever watched a single episode. Maybe some clips on YouTube, but 3 years in syndication is not too bad. And it was announced back in 2018 that one of the movies for Disney Plus would be a sequel to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, called Shrunk, which would star Josh Gad as the adult Nick Zielinski. We have not heard anything yet about what's going on with this movie, and it's 2023.
Yeah, I mean, the last we heard about it was pre-COVID, and that was some reports that Rick Moranis would be, now that he's kind of...
His kids are grown, yeah.
Now that he's kind of phasing out of his, semi-retirement or pause in his career or whatever, so that he could raise his kids, he had agreed, at least that was what we had heard, that he had agreed to come back for that, and that Joe Johnston was coming back as the director.
And that's all we know. That's
yeah, that was the last we heard, and then COVID kind of shut everything down. And then with the changeovers, in Disney management and everything, it's just kind of seemingly lost in the shuffle right now.
And as we are recording this movie, the writer's strike is going on. So if that movie hasn't already been filmed, it ain't gonna for a while.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, everything's kind of up in the air at the moment as to what's being filmed and what's not due to negotiations. I mean, as of recording, the Writers Guild is on strike, and SAG-AFTRA has a massive renegotiation as of right now that could end up in a strike for them. And also the Directors Guild is currently undergoing renegotiations that, if they do not go well, they may also end up in a strike. So before the end of the year, it is possible that there will be 3 major guilds in Hollywood that might end up in a strike, possibly all at the same time.
And studios are saying, it's okay, we'll just use AI for everything. Because, of course.
I mean, that would be literally writing, acting, and directing that they would have to use AI for. So...
yeah. So...
I want to say good luck to them in a extremely ironic way, because that would be funny in all the ways it isn't. But
yeah,
sometimes you gotta F around and find out. So
well, we don't have writers on our podcast, so
as I think everyone can tell.
But yeah, so let's ask the question, Kiki. Does Honey, I Shrunk the Kids have the magic?
Oh, I think it still does as a cute little kids film. I mean, I think for adults going into it the first time, it's going to be a curiosity at best. I think kids watching it would get something out of it, but I think for adults it's mostly a nostalgia hit if you remember it from your childhood.
It's definitely a product of its time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the effects do still hold up, but story-wise, it's still very much a product of its time. I remember liking this a lot more when I was a kid watching this than I did on this rewatch. So, as an adult who hasn't watched this movie in probably 20-something years, 25 years, I would say. Probably not. I hate saying that because I did love this movie as a kid, and I did want to rewatch it for this podcast. Well, when you mentioned you want to watch, do this movie, I was all down for it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe this movie, the concept is great. I did, even as a youngin, I did prefer the sequel more than the original, and I think that's still the case. So if we ever do the sequel one day, I might have a different opinion. So I'm going to unfortunately say no magic.
I mean, there's still magic for me here, and I think it mostly comes from nostalgia and seeing the threads of where it came from and all the homages to,
the Incredible Shrinking Man.
Yeah, I mean, Incredible Shrinking Man and them, and all the weird little sci-fi stuff from the 50s, and that they're throwing back to, and probably whatever was in that weird little Teeny Weenie script that one day I would absolutely give a limb to read. But
And one more thing before we get going. We haven't mentioned it, but it goes without saying, but all of the animal noises in this movie was done by Frank Welker, legendary voice actor, the voice of your childhood. So yeah, every dog bark, every cat meow, even the sound of the cat clock was all Frank Welker.
Yeah.
And even if I didn't already know that, but looking at the cast listing, I could watch the movie and hear that dog bark. And says, "Oh, hi Frank, you're in this movie too."
Yeah. Um, it's amazing where Frank Welker shows up. It's like, suddenly, Frank Welker! Like,
This dog didn't bark on cue. Don't worry, we'll get Frank to do it. He'll be fine.
yeah.
So let's move on to next week. Kiki, I have one question for you for next week. Do you have a towel?
I do. I always have a towel. I am a hoopy fruit.
Yes. So grab your towels for next week because we are celebrating Towel Day with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the attempt to make this into a movie. And we'll go into the long history of hitchhikers, and we finally get to talk about Douglas Adams because we didn't get to talk about him when we did our Doctor Who episode. This is why we didn't talk about him when we did Doctor Who, because we're going to talk about him next week. Okay, good. So come back next week for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun,
But there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area.